Good morning. Welcome to Market Coffee Talk. This is Louis Llanes. I have my cup of coffee. I hope you have a cup of coffee with you too. Today, we're going to be talking about the madness of crowds. But before we do that, I'm going to take a sip. You know, my wife, so good. My wife bought me a present. She bought me this new coffee maker. It's one of these presses that I don't know exactly what you call it, but it's a Italian type setup, and it just makes amazing coffee. So it is, before 9/11 happened, I'm sitting in a boardroom and I'm with a group of chartered financial analysts. I used to be on the board as the education chair on the Chartered Financial Analysts group. And there was this discussion about inclusiveness there. I had a friend of mine at that time. He wasn't a friend. He was just new to Colorado, coming in from New York. He was a trader on the pit, I believe, stock trader, and he was on the board with me. So we were talking about who we were going to allow to be members in the Chartered Financial Analyst Group. So the Chartered Financial Analyst Group is a very exclusive group because it takes a ton of discipline to actually get a CFA. It's the most rigorous, hardest designation in the investment business to get. You have to really be dedicated to get to it. So at the time, there was a lot of discussion about who we're going to keep out of the group and how we were going to accept people or not accept people. And when we were going around the table, they came to me and I said, I think we should be more inclusive and we should let people get a chance, because there's a lot of people that were being shut out because of their pedigree, the school they went to or did not go to, what their current job was. And I was thinking, there's a lot of people that have tons of desire to get in this business that will work the extra mile, and we're going to just shut those people out because of their pedigree. And I didn't think that was right. So fast forward years later, like 15 years later, I got to know Jason Meshnick, a pretty good friend of mine. He's more of a colleague. We don't go out together all the time, but he's a good guy, and we really get along. And we worked together on the Chartered Market Technicians Association's board. So we were both board chairs, and so we've worked closely together for a long time. And we were having dinner one night, and he said, I remember a long time ago, we were on the board at the CFA Institute, and you said that it should be more inclusive, and that really struck me, and that's why I liked you. And I thought, well, that was kind of cool. You never know who you're going to meet and in what setting, and there's always a byproduct of things that you do. And if you follow the crowd, you can really get bad results. And so it was, much later in 2019, Jason called me up. He said, what? I have this idea. He works for this big financial information firm. It's a firm called Market that sells data, really, really amazing data to institutions like your big brokerage firms and your big hedge funds and all that. He's like, I've got this idea. When you look at the active list, every day when you're looking at stocks, there's an active list, like what stocks are the most active today. And he's like, that's not really an accurate assessment of what an accurate or a active stock is. And I said, well, tell me what you mean. He says, every day, I used to work on the pit, and we could tell by the volume of the noise how things worked, but now everything's virtual, and we really can't tell what is really active. And he says, well, what if we were to say, okay, here's the average amount of activity that is happening, the average crowd activity, and then let's compare today's activity to the average. And I'm like, okay, well, let's check that out. So, and his idea was, as I understand it, was just to have a better most active list. And I believe they were actually already selling this data to other firms, and he wanted to maybe submit this to the Dow Jones Award, a paper on that. And I'm like, okay, well, I can help you with some research because we have the tools to do some back testing. Let's see the formula. So we got the formula, and we took a look at it, and it's interesting because what we found out was, yes, it does give you a better list in terms of what stocks are active, but there was a strategic byproduct of that it helped you understand good setups when a stock was about to take off. It was more of an anticipatory type of indicator, meaning that you would think that a stock that's really active, that, hey, everybody's jumping on this, so let's jump on with everybody else. So we back tested it. My firm back tested it, And I had my hands in there, rolled up my sleeves in it. So I was really looking at the data over two massive cycles, two long cycles in the markets, going through all the stocks in the S&P 500 day by day, checking this indicator, checking it up against what happened in the future month, right? When the relative volume is what this indicator is called, when the relative volume was high versus low. So was activity high or was activity low? And what we found out was just the opposite. The companies that had quiet volume in the current month tended to have much better performance in the next month. It's almost like the calm before the storm. And so it was amazing because it was robust enough, statistically speaking, that it could be used as an indicator. So that concept now, that strategic byproduct, we now use in helping us identifying companies that could be ready to take off. So for example, if you think about Zoom, I'm not on Zoom right now, but you probably have been on Zoom a ton. Well, before Zoom took off, it had very quiet trading. It had all the fundamental characteristics. It had a lot of things going for it. But before it actually made a massive move, it was actually going sideways, even down a little bit, and with quiet volume, and it was being quietly accumulated, and then it took off. So the relative volume gave you a great precursor indicator to the madness of the crowds that was about to take on something. So this also works to the downside. Stocks and companies that are about to go down, a lot of times they'll be quiet beforehand, and then you'll see the acceleration to the downside. But generally, volume is higher towards the tail end of it. So, just buying the stock that's up strong on current volume is not necessarily a good indicator to what's going to happen right away, at least in the next month. There's other things that will happen from that. But that particular study that we did, he did write a paper on it, and he submitted it to the Dow Jones Award. Now, he didn't win the award, and that's not the point. The point was Jason found an indicator that was worthwhile, not even, in my opinion, to find out who's really active that day, but more so for us to help us find stocks that are about to have some big moves. And so the madness of crowds should be watched because, as you know, crowds don't necessarily mean you don't necessarily want to follow the crowd. In fact, you want to be ahead of the herd. You don't want to be in the herd necessarily. If you get in the herd close enough to the beginning, that's fine. But it's really not a good idea to just follow what everybody else is. I don't know that people have really grasped onto that, but I'd like to know what you think. I mean, what do you find to be the madness of crowds these days? Are you finding the madness of crowds where it makes absolute sense when crowds get together with recent developments that we've seen in Washington or just across the country? I mean, I think you can make a really strong argument that the crowds can be very mad once we get together. So, but you don't have to be. You can be an independent thinker. So my point of the day was the crowds could be crazy. And second, take a look at things when things are quiet, not necessarily when everybody's looking at it. And the third thing is that there are strategic byproducts of what you do. You might be set off to do something else. Like I went to go set off to the CFA meeting, but I met an amazing friend. Or you may be working on a project for one thing, and then you wind up finding something that's even better. So, well, that's all for now. I hope you guys have a great day. I'll be back on at 9:15 with JP Tremblay, my chief investment officer for my firm. And we're going to be talking about the markets, do a market wrap up, and what we're seeing in the markets, what's on our desk this week. Hope you're doing well, and we will talk to you later.